Hello everyone, welcome back to another video from the Retro Asylum. I'm Andy and today I'll be comparing a Golden Axe on the arcade to Golden Axe on the 16-bit Sega, Genesis, Megadrive, whatever you want to call it. Now the reason why I'm doing this is because I'm a huge fan of the Golden Axe arcade machine. I love the game. I think it's fantastic. Now what we'll be doing is looking at little things like the intro there. For some reason it's not playing any music in this arcade version. I'm sure there was. We're going to look at the sort of text, we're going to look at the sprites, we're going to look at the colour, we're going to look at the sound effects, well, listen to the sound effects. Because I do think it was at this point, you know, that the console started bridging over. It started looking and feeling more like the arcade game. Before this, you know, it was released on the Sega Master System, on the 8-bit computers, and bless their little hearts, they did try and sort of look and feel like the arcade game. Yeah, fair enough, some of them may play like the arcade game, but they didn't have the graphics. You know, the Master System version was good, but it still didn't have the graphics. And the first time I played the Megadrive version, I was blown away of how accurate it is. Now, this isn't, you know, to see which version's better. It's literally just to see, you know, how faithful the Megadrive version was, because I do believe this was one of the first proper arcade conversions that made me feel like I was playing an arcade game at home. Now, all these little things like that, I think is a perfect introduction to the amazing game, like Death Adder, so that way this game gives you a whole feel. Now that was the arcade intro. Let's have a look at the Megadrive intro. So there's the Sega Classic logo. Now it's got some nice music there on the Megadrive, just to sort of like really get you in the Golden Axe mood. The colour scheme's slightly different there. And again, if you look at the sprite there, it looks absolutely fantastic. I do think some of the sprites are a little bit smaller on those big giant baddies, but we'll compare those a little bit more once we get into the actual game. This is just the introduction once again. This is just basically telling you who the characters are. Now they use a slightly different colour scheme down there, and it's a bit smaller, the art there. But all in all, I don't think that affects the game massively. I mean, the music, I think, you know, although not 100% accurate, is faithful to the arcade game. Okay, I suppose that when those magic powers are being activated, the graphics aren't as accurate. But all in all, again, I'm still amazed how accurate this arcade game is. Now, fair enough, there's loads of better scroll and beat 'em ups, but to me, this will always hold a special place in my heart because just everything that the Golden Axe game had. You know, you had your barbarian, it had your Amazon, it had your little dwarf guy with a beard, it had magical powers, and those skeletons, which kind of made me feel like I was playing like a Jason and the Argonauts game combined with Conan. So yeah, absolutely one of the most memorable scroll and beat 'em ups ever. Not the greatest. Now this did have a few other options that the arcade didn't have. Arcade, beginner, dual. Now this is the character select screen from the arcade. Listen to the music. And we'll have a look at the different size of sprites there. Right, so I've gone for the barbarian. Now, different background there. There seems to be a little bit more detail on the Megadrive sprites, actually, where the arcade one looked a little bit bland. Okay, here's the arcade intro. Well, the arcade first level. As you can see, the guy's been hurt there. It's got a little bit of conversation between the guys. Now, let's look at the size of the sprites. They're pretty decent size there. They've got some voice, you know, some sample speech there. And we're just having a little look at the power there, just to see what the explosions look like. When the characters die, they turn like a shade of grey, and they lie down on the floor there. Well, obviously they do, because they're dead. Now, according to Melk, the voice samples in the arcade game Some of them were taken from Rambo, I believe. Now the reason why it's being a bit quiet there is so we can just get a feel of how the music sounds like. Now if you just looked at there, the background changed from a different sort of like shade of grey to green there in the scenery. We'll have a little look at the detail on the floor there and on the background. You know, it's a bit plain and bland for today's standard when we look at games, but back in the day that was really detailed and it does look pretty nice. Now I want you to look at the little midget guys there. I'm not being politically correct there, but those little fellas then, whatever they are. Because they look very different on the Megadrive version. Now the other thing I want to point out is that creature there, it's called Chicken Leg. Now look at its mouth, it walks along, doesn't stick its tongue out, because I believe on the Megadrive version it does. And I also want to compare the way these big fat fellas look like, you know, the guys with the man boobs. They're pretty big sprites. They're really sort of like chunky. They're, you know, they're fat. Other little things we're going to look at in this game as well is like all the little details. I do believe the sprites are a little bit more detailed on the Sega Mega Drive version. They look a little bit bland on the arcade version. And we'll look at things like animation as well. Now, basically, I'm going to quickly just go off topic a little bit, but the first time I played this in the arcade, I was blown away. I was blown away by the size of the sprites of these characters. It just looked different, you know. It always feels like they should have had voice, sampled speech when they were laughing there. Alright, so we're coming to the end of the first level there. I love this little sub-tune here, when you get your energy. The little map here, which shows you the path of your journey that you have to go to. Now guys, this isn't really a review, it's literally just me comparing two of, you know, well, my favourite game on the arcade and on the Mega Drive, really. Look at the little villages there, sampled speech are running off. Right, now this is the Mega Drive. Now the colour scheme is very different. Straight away you'll see that the background isn't this sort of grey faded out. There's not as much detail on the trees there. It looks a little bit more, I don't know, 2D, where the other had a little bit more, you know, solid feel to it. Now in this one, there's no parallax scrolling in the background. I believe in the arcade, you know, the thing scrolled at a different pace towards the, rather than the foreground. Now they use a different colour sort of like on the actual sprites, which I actually prefer the Mega Drive version. It looks a lot nicer, it gives it a bit more colourful, where the other one felt a little bit faded out. Now the Mega Drive has got samples, but I don't think it's got all the arcade samples, you know, that the arcade had. It hasn't got the one where it goes, oh shit. Now those little guys there, I mentioned those earlier on. Look at their faces, they look very different compared to the way they do in the arcade game. Now the music is pretty much spot on there. Just a few little differences. Now, there we go, look, if you look at his little tongue on Chicken Leg there, it is sticking out. It's sort of like, it's got like a little yellow thing. But the sound effects are superb. Now I think as a kid who grew up in the 1990s playing this game, I was blown away by this. I honestly was completely blown away. I mean, I had Golden Axe on the Spectrum, Amstrad and on the Commodore 64, and also on the Sega Master System. And don't get me wrong, the Sega Master System is a superb conversion. It looks really nice. That was lacking a few things, but the Mega Drive version featured quite a lot of things and added a few elements to the game as well. Now that was a nice little touch there, the way the background just changed colour. But again, this game does feel, although the graphics are nice, it does feel like it's a little bit more 2D, whereas the way the detail made the arcade version look a lot more 3D and a lot more solid. But what this does have, I think the character sprites are a lot more detailed actually. I mean, look at the muscle tone on Axe Battler himself. Now those bald baddies that I mentioned earlier aren't quite as big as in the arcade game. They're actually a lot smaller. And they're not as fat actually in this version. They seem to have gone on the slim fast diet plan. Alright, so it's the little subsection here. The fire looks a little bit smaller, you know, no big, big game changer. And again, we've got the little map section. But all in all, you know what? We're nearly rounding up the end of this video. I think Golden Axe is a superb, arcade conversion. I think it often gets forgotten how similar it is to the arcade. Now, we'll be doing a load more of these arcade conversions in the next few weeks and months. Plus, I'll be doing loads more 8-bit wars plus 16-bit wars. Enjoy, guys.